Good evening. I'd like to provide the American people with an update on our efforts to protect the integrity of our very important 2020 election. If you count the legal votes, I easily win. If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us. If you count the votes that came in late, we're looking at them very strongly, but a lot of votes came in late. I've already decisively won many critical states, including massive victories in Florida, Iowa, Indiana, Ohio. To name just a few, we won these and many other victories despite historic election interference from big media, big money, and big tech. As everybody saw, we won by historic numbers. And the pollsters got it knowingly wrong. They got it knowingly wrong. We had polls that were so ridiculous, and everybody knew it at the time. There was no blue wave that they predicted. They thought there was going to be a big blue wave. That was false. It was done for suppression reasons. But instead, there was a big red wave. And it's been properly acknowledged, actually, by the media. They were, I think, very impressed. But that was after the fact. That doesn't do us any good. We kept the Senate despite having twice as many seats to defend as Democrats. And in a really much more competitive states, we did a fantastic job with the Senate. I think we're very proud of what's happened there. We had many more seats to defend. They spent almost $200 million on Senate races in South Carolina and Kentucky alone, 2 races, and hundreds of millions of dollars overall against us. At the national level, our opponents' major donors were Wall Street bankers and special interests. Our major donors were police officers, farmers, everyday citizens. Yet for the first time ever, we lost 0 races in the House. I was talking to Kevin McCarthy today. He said he couldn't believe it. 0 races, very unusual thing, 0. And actually won many new seats with, I think, many more on the way. This was also the year of the Republican woman. More Republican women were elected to Congress than ever before. That's a great achievement. I won the largest share of non-white voters of any Republican in 60 years, including historic numbers of Latino, African American, Asian American, and Native American voters, the largest ever in our history. We grew our party by 4 million voters, the greatest turnout in Republican Party history. Democrats are the party of the big donors, the big media, the big tech, it seems, and Republicans have become the party of the American worker, and that's what's happened. And we're also, I believe, the party of inclusion. As everyone now recognizes, media polling was election interference in the truest sense of that word by powerful special interests. These really phony polls, I have to call them phony polls, fake polls, were designed to keep our voters at home, create the illusion of momentum for Mr. Biden, and diminish Republicans' ability to raise funds. They were what's called suppression polls. Everyone knows that now. And it's never been used to the extent that it's been used on this last election. To highlight just a few examples, the day before election, Quinnipiac, which was wrong on every occasion that I know of, had Joe Biden up by 5 points in Florida, and they were off by 8.4 points, and I won Florida easily. So they had me losing Florida by a lot, and I ended up winning Florida by a lot. Other than that, they were very accurate. They had him up 4 points in Ohio, and they were up by 12.2 points. And I also won Ohio, great state of Ohio, very easily. The Washington Post said Biden up 17 points in Wisconsin, and it was basically even. They were off by about 17 points. And they knew that. They're not stupid people. They knew that. Suppression. There are now only a few states yet to be decided in the presidential race. The voting apparatus of those states are run in all cases by Democrats. We were winning in all the key locations by a lot, actually. And then our numbers started miraculously getting whittled away in secret, and they wouldn't allow legally permissible observers. We went to court in a couple of instances, and we were able to get the observers put in. And when the observers got there, they wanted them 60, 70 feet away, 80 feet, 100 feet away, or outside the building to observe people inside the building. And we won a case, a big case, and we have others happening. There are lots of litigation, even beyond our litigation. There's tremendous amount of litigation generally because of how unfair this process was. And I predicted that. I've been talking about mail-in voting for a long time. It's really destroyed our system. It's a corrupt system. And it makes people corrupt even if they aren't by nature. But they become corrupt. It's too easy. They want to find out how many votes they need, and then they seem to be able to find them. They wait, and then they find them. And you see that on election night. We were ahead in vote in North Carolina by a lot, tremendous number of votes. And we're still ahead by a lot, but not as many, because they're finding ballots all of a sudden. Oh, we have some mail-in ballots. It's amazing how those mail-in ballots are so one-sided, too. I know that it's supposed to be to the advantage of the Democrats, but in all cases, they're so one-sided. We were up by nearly 700,000 votes in Pennsylvania. I won Pennsylvania by a lot, and that gets whittled down to, I think they said now we're up by 90,000 votes, and they'll keep coming and coming and coming. They find them all over, and they don't want us to have any observers, although we won a court case. The judge said you have to have observers. Likewise in Georgia, and they're appealing. Actually, they're appealing. We won a case that we want people to watch, and we want observers, and they're actually appealing, which is sort of interesting. I wonder why they'd appeal, that all we want to do is have people watch as they do the vote tabulations. Likewise in Georgia, I won by a lot, with a lead of over getting close to 300,000 votes on election night in Georgia. And by the way, got whittled down, and now it's getting to be to a point where I'll go from winning by a lot to perhaps being even down a little bit. In Georgia, a pipe burst in a faraway location, totally unrelated to the location of what was happening, and they stopped counting for 4 hours, and a lot of things happened. The election apparatus in Georgia is run by Democrats. We also had margins of 300,000 in Michigan. We're way up in Michigan, won the state. And in Wisconsin, we did likewise fantastically well. And that got whittled down. In every case, they got whittled down. Today, we're on track to win Arizona. We only need to carry, I guess, 55% of the remaining vote, 55% margins. And that's a margin that we've significantly exceeded. So we'll see what happens with that. But we're on track to do okay in Arizona. Our goal is to defend the integrity of the election. We'll not allow the corruption to steal such an important election, or any election for that matter. And we can't allow anybody to silence our voters and manufacture results. I've been doing a lot of public things for a long time. I've never had anything that's been as inspirational, by people calling, talking, sending things to us. I've never seen such love and such affection and such spirit as I've seen for this. People know what's happening, and they see what's happening, and it's before their eyes. And there are many instances which will be reported very shortly. There's tremendous litigation going on, and this is a case where they're trying to steal an election. They're trying to rig an election, and we can't let that happen. Detroit and Philadelphia, known as two of the most corrupt political places anywhere in our country, easily cannot be responsible for engineering the outcome of a presidential race, a very important presidential race. In Pennsylvania, Democrats have gone to the state Supreme Court to try and ban our election observers, and very strongly. Now, we won the case, but they're going forward. They don't want anybody in there. They don't want anybody watching them as they count the ballots. And I can't imagine why. There's absolutely no legitimate reason why they would not want to have people watching this process, because if it's straight, they should be proud of it. Instead, they're trying, obviously, to commit fraud. There's no question about that. In Philadelphia, observers have been kept far away, very far away, so far that people are using binoculars to try and see, and there's been tremendous problems caused. They put paper on all of the windows so you can't see in, and the people that are banned are very unhappy and become somewhat violent. The 11th Circuit ruled that in Georgia the votes have been in by Election Day, that they should be in by Election Day, and they weren't. Votes are coming in after Election Day. And they had a ruling already that you have to have the votes in by Election Day. To the best of my knowledge, votes should be in by Election Day. And they didn't do that. Democrat officials never believed they could win this election, honestly. I really believe that. That's why they did the mail-in ballots, where there's tremendous corruption and fraud going on. That's why they mailed out tens of millions of unsolicited ballots without any verification measures whatsoever. And I've told everybody that these things would happen because I've seen it happen. I watched a lot of different elections before they decided to go with this big, massive election with tens of millions of ballots going out to everybody, in many cases totally unsolicited. This was unprecedented in American history. This was by design, despite years of claiming to care about the election security. They refused to include any requirement to verify signatures, identities, or even determine whether they're eligible or ineligible to vote. People are walking in there. They have no idea. They're just taking numbers. They're writing down things, the workers, and doing a lot of bad things. And we have a lot of information coming and litigation that you'll see that will shake even you people up. And you've seen it all. The officials overseeing the counting in Pennsylvania and other key states are all part of a corrupt Democrat machine that you've written about. And for a long time, you've been writing about the corrupt Democrat machine. I went to school there, and I know a lot about it. It hasn't changed. It's a long time ago, and hasn't changed. It's gotten worse. In Pennsylvania, partisan Democrats have allowed ballots in the state to be received 3 days after the election. And we think much more than that. And they're counting those without even postmarks or any identification whatsoever. So you don't have postmarks, you don't have identification. There have been a number of disturbing irregularities across the nation. Our campaign has been denied access to observe any counting in Detroit. Detroit is another place, and I wouldn't say it has the best reputation for election integrity. Poll workers in Michigan were duplicating ballots, but when our observers attempted to challenge the activity, those poll workers jumped in front of the volunteers to block their view so that they couldn't see what they were doing. And it became a little bit dangerous. One major hub for counting ballots in Detroit covered up the windows again with large pieces of cardboard. And so they wanted to protect and block the counting area. They didn't want anybody seeing the counting, even though these were observers who were legal observers that were supposed to be there. In Detroit, there were hours of unexplained delay in delivering many of the votes for counting. The final batch did not arrive until 4 in the morning, and even though the polls closed at 8 o'clock. So they brought it in, and the batches came in, and nobody knew where they came from. We've also been denied access to observe in critical places in Georgia. In multiple swing states, counting was halted for hours and hours on election night, with results withheld from major Democrat-run locations only to appear later. And they suddenly appeared, and they all had the name Biden on them, or just about all. I think almost all. They all had the name Biden on them, which is a little strange. I challenge Joe and every Democrat to clarify that they only want legal votes, because they talk about votes, and I think they should use the word legal votes. We want every legal vote counted, and I want every legal vote counted. We want openness and transparency, no secret count rooms, no mystery ballots, no illegal votes being cast after Election Day. You have Election Day, and the laws are very strong on that. You have an Election Day, and they don't want votes cast after Election Day, and they want the process to be an honest one. It's so important. We want an honest election, and we want an honest count, and we want honest people working back there because it's a very important job. So that's the way this country is going to win. That's the way the United States will win, and we think we will win the election very easily. We think there's going to be a lot of litigation because we have so much evidence, so much proof, and it's going to end up perhaps at the highest court in the land. We'll see. But we think there'll be a lot of litigation because we can't have an election stolen like this. And I tell you, I have been talking about this for many months with all of you, and I've said very strongly that mail-in ballots are going to end up being a disaster. Small elections were a disaster. Small, very easy to handle elections were disastrous. This is a large-scale version, and it's getting worse and worse every day. We're hearing stories that are horror stories, absolute horror stories, and we can't let that happen to the United States of America. It's not a question of who wins, Republican, Democrat, Joe, myself. We can't let that happen to our country. We can't be disgraced by having something like this happen. So it will be hopefully cleared up, maybe soon, I hope soon, but it'll probably go through a process, a legal process. And as you know, I've claimed certain states, and he's claiming states, and we can both claim the states. But ultimately, I have a feeling judges are going to have to rule. But there's been a lot of shenanigans, and we can't stand for that in our country. Thank you very much.
What a sad night for the United States of America to hear their president say that, to falsely accuse people of trying to steal the election, to try to attack democracy that way with this feast of falsehoods. Lie after lie after lie about the election being stolen. No evidence for what he's saying, just smears about the integrity of vote counting in state after state. When he wins a state, it's legitimate. When he loses, it's because the vote is being stolen from him. It's not true. It's ugly. It's frankly pathetic. The president, for example, he assailed vote by mail. Why, he asked, why are the vote by mail ballots so overwhelmingly in favor of Joe Biden? We all know the answer. It's because the president told his supporters not to vote by mail. So Democrats did it overwhelmingly, and his supporters turned out in droves on Election Day. Look, President Trump has always been transparent about the smears and lies and strategies of falsehoods. We knew he was going to do this. We knew he was going to claim votes by mail were not real. But he's wrong. It's a lie. He's lying about the election. He's smearing the American people. He's smearing people who are working at polls, and it's a disgrace. We knew that the president was not going to lose graciously if he lost. But frankly, watching him flail like this is just pathetic.
As he was talking, I was trying to reach out to some senior Republicans to ask when the intervention is going to happen, because this isn't just partisan. This isn't just dangerous. It's nonsensical. It's illogical. And there's so many things to say. One of the things that I was thinking about listening to him now is how much we listened to him for the past, 4, 5 months, telling his voters, do not vote early. It's fraudulent. And now we sort of suspected it then. Now we know the reason for that, so that he could have this moment in the White House briefing room. So he could say that the votes that are coming in by mail are fraudulent. And the reason is because he knew that Democrats, because we are in a pandemic, were more apt to vote early by mail and to not want to risk their health and sometimes their lives by going to vote in person. It's a setup. He set the country up. He set his supporters up for a moment like this, which is completely false. And you said sad. It is sad. I mean, I'm not an emotional person, and I'm having trouble kind of keeping it together after listening to the President of the United States saying what he just said.
This president clearly knows that this is not going to end well for him, or he believes that, and he's trying to take the rest of the country down with him. Yeah. He's trying to take the voting system down with him, the democratic process down with him. And beyond being completely selfish, it also is just wrong. And as you said, where's the intervention? I don't know where it is. And it probably should have happened months ago because, as you said, Dana, he already told us he was going to do this. He's already said months ago, the only way I could lose this election is if there were widespread, massive fraud, which we knew was not going to happen. And now he is apparently, he believes he is losing the election. The numbers are not heading in his direction. And he's claiming that there is fraud everywhere in the country except for one place, the place where the vote count is narrowing in his favor in Arizona. This is a complete farce and a travesty, and it's incredible that he's doing it from the White House, but notable also, Vice President Mike Pence, nowhere to be found.
Well, the other thing is the point that you made earlier, Abby, which is the president would like us to believe, would like the nation to believe that there is this grand conspiracy in every state in the nation to take this election from him. And yet, somebody else gave him a list of Republican accomplishments in this election to read from, right? Not one Republican lost a seat in the House. That Republicans held on to the Senate. A tremendous night of success for the Republican Party. So President Trump would have you believe that the elections went great for every Republican in the country almost, except for him. So the diabolical Democrats and big money, big media, and big tech conspired. And we all got together and we decided what we're going to do is we're going to help every Republican win elections across the country except for Donald Trump.
Yep.
Does that make sense to anybody except for the most fevered brain?
Yeah, unfortunately, the answer is no. Is it logical? Of course not. Did what you just say make sense? Absolutely. Trying to dissect it. But I will say it again. One of the reasons why what we just heard and saw is dangerous is not just because he's the president of the United States. It is because there are so many people who absolutely love him and believe everything he says. So he and mostly his children on Twitter are sowing the seeds of doubt in democracy in a way that is going to make it very hard for his party, frankly, to come back from.
You know, the president and his children, especially, are actively and openly inciting violence in this country. The president's son tweeted that Trump will go to war over this election. The president said tonight that his supporters were so angry that they couldn't get into a place where they were tabulating votes, that they would get violent almost. So it's intentional and it's dangerous, and it really needs to stop. The votes need to be counted, and the president needs to abide by whatever that result is. He signaled tonight that he is not going to be willing to do that, and that is dangerous for this country.
It's time for some Republican lawmakers to find their spine and talk to the president about what he needs to do for the good of the country. Anderson?
Jake, thanks very much. We have never seen really, other than, well, I don't think we've ever seen anything like this from a president of the United States. And I think, as Jake said, it's sad and it is truly pathetic. And of course it is dangerous, and of course it will go to courts. But you'll notice the president did not have any evidence presented at all. Nothing. No real, actual evidence of any kind of fraud. He talked about people putting up papers in windows. He talked about things that he'd seen on the internet. That is the president of the United States. That is the most powerful person in the world. And we see him like an obese turtle on his back, flailing in the hot sun, realizing his time is over. But he just hasn't accepted it, and he wants to take everybody down with him, including this country. Gloria?
You know, I think that the world is watching, and they're watching an American president undermine democracy in the United States. It's painful to those of us who love America. It is painful and dangerous what he's doing. It is not surprising, of course, because he told us early on that if he didn't win, he was going to say the election was rigged, and maybe we didn't believe he would come out and do it in this way. But it is still startling to us to just hear the president from a podium in the White House undermine democracy. And as Jake was saying before, I have to keep saying, if this was such a big plot by Democrats, why didn't they do better? Why didn't they do better in the House? Why didn't they do better in the Senate? So the president makes himself the ultimate victim here. Over and over again, it's about him. And it's not about the fact that the other Republicans did okay. It's about him, and his family is complaining. Why isn't everybody coming out and defending him? Why isn't Lindsey Graham coming out and defending him? Because a lot of Republicans, it is time for them to say enough is enough.
Rick Santorum?
No Republican elected official is going to stand behind that statement. I mean, none of them will. They will stand behind elements of that statement. They will stand behind his comment about the polling and how you could make the argument that it was suppression and dishonest. I mean, you can stand behind the lack of transparency when it came to allowing the votes to be counted. There's evidence of that, and he provided some evidence for that. There are certain things they will stand behind in that statement because they reflect the reality. But much of that statement was not factual and was at times incendiary and not something that President of the United States should say or any elected official should say.
You said
unless you have evidence to prove it. And at this point in time, we don't, and we won't until there is an investigation as to what happened. And I got to tell you, I sat there and I listened to him talking about the votes being taken away from him. And then he shifted to Arizona and said, hey, I win this thing if they count the votes. Well, how can you say, well, we have to wait and count the votes in Arizona and I can win this thing if we're making it. But if you count the votes in Philadelphia, you're stealing them. The reality is in Pennsylvania, Democrats voted by mail and Republicans voted by in person. And it's because you asked them to do so. And so I think most people, hopefully, I just encourage people to listen, because I know there's a lot of people who think this election is stolen. A lot of people think there is fraud. And you know what? There may be fraud. There may be we don't know that right now. And for the president to go out there and claim that without any evidence of that is dangerous. And I just would say to the president, there may be some validity in some of the things that you believe, but to go out there and suggest that this is rigged or that counting votes in my home state by clerks all over 67 counties, and as you kept losing votes, was somehow rigged. No, Democrats voted by mail. That's why your lead went away. Had they voted in person, you would be in the same position we are right now. So it's just it's very disappointing.
I think
shocking at times to hear the president say the things that he said, and I'm hopeful that that Republicans will stand up at this moment and say what needs to be said about the integrity of our election. Be tough, fight. I want him to fight. I want him to make sure that this election was held fairly, but I don't want him to draw these conclusions when he doesn't have the evidence to back it up.
Well, I just want to thank you for what you just said. First of all, it's not an easy thing to say, given the polarity in the country. But I just want to just say, as a dad, as an American, as a Democrat, as a human being, I appreciate you saying that. And I hope that other Republicans will also stand with you. You're right. You've been out all night. There are some things that you guys don't like, and you want to fight on those narrow issues. But to have the President of the United States take that position that he took, I think is very dangerous. But it's comforting to me that our system is holding. People are still counting these votes. We're still moving forward, and I just want to say I appreciate you saying that.
The governor of Georgia is going to count these votes. The governor of Arizona is going to count these votes. I mean, they're Republican governors.
Yeah. As is the Secretary of State in Georgia, I believe.
Yeah, and the Secretary of State. So, look.
So what do other Republicans do? And what does a Mitch McConnell come out and say? What does...
Mitch McConnell's going to say what Mitch McConnell said today. We're going to count the votes. And that's what every Republican is going to say. The votes in Pennsylvania need to be counted. People voted. You have to count their votes. And if there are instances in which we find some sort of fraud or some sort of
shenanigans
that are being played, you investigate them, you get to the bottom of them, and if they're substantial, I mean, there's this claim running out there that there's 130,000 votes, and the president referred to it, that came out of nowhere in Michigan. Okay, if that's true, prove it. Go out there and find find it and do it. And if it's true, then you got a serious problem, and then we attack it. But counting absentee ballots and counting mail-in ballots is not fraud.
Well, let's be clear. The president believes that an election is fraudulent when he does not win. That is what he believes. Before the election in 2016, when he thought he wasn't going to win, he predicted that the election would be rigged, that the election was fraudulent. When he didn't win the popular vote, he contended that the 3 million votes that he lost by were fraudulent votes, and he impaneled a commission, a government commission, to find those votes, and they never could. So really this is incredibly disturbing, but it's not surprising. This is who he is. I have big differences with Donald Trump over policy and, the same differences that I probably have with you over some of these policies. But what we've learned is how much our democracy relies on people of goodwill in high places respecting its tenets, understanding that its institutions are absolutely essential and to its functioning, and there is nothing more sacred than this institution. And he is willing to subjugate the institutions of our democracy to his own personal interests, and that has been true from the beginning. This is just the latest and the saddest chapter, and it's increasingly looking like the last one.
I want to add something, Gloria, if you don't mind.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Part of what he said that's so terrible is that he's attacking actual Americans who right now, he said in Detroit, they're not letting Republicans in. That's literally not true. It's just not true. Republicans and Democrats are standing shoulder to shoulder in Detroit right now counting those votes. So it's unbelievable the level of lying that he's doing. Putin could not come up with a better attack on our democracy.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more.
The President of the United States.
Let me say something that let's just be really blunt about this. Why is he talking about Detroit? Why is he talking about Philadelphia? Yeah. It's not subtle. It's race. It's race. It's Donald Trump's go-to play, and it's disgusting. So I just want to say that.
I appreciate you teeing it up. It's unbelievable that he can say these cities are known for corruption, et cetera, et cetera. There's corruption all across this country, in every institution. Why are you singling out these 2 black cities? Why are you denying the victory that these people have fought for? I'm upset about it because African Americans have fought so hard for the right to vote. I just want to finish. African Americans and our allies have fought so hard for the right to. This right to vote for us is precious. John Lewis died this year. This is something we went and we got young African Americans across this country to believe, to buy in, to stand in line, to do this thing, and have the President of the United States crap all over their efforts. It hurts. And you can say he doesn't mean it to be racial, but it feels racial to us.
It's disgraceful. I've covered politics a really long time, and I've never witnessed anything like this. And again, as you were saying, you're not surprised, but it's still stunning and striking at so many levels. You talk about the issue of race. I totally agree with you. But it's watching a president who is unable to accept loss or potential loss, defeat. Losing is for suckers. Remember that? If he can't accept it, so he has to find a way to undermine the process that has him losing. And the process that has him losing is democracy. How can you do that when you are president of the United States? Again, not surprising, but just shocking and very sad.
I want to go to Jim Acosta, who's at the White House. Jim?
Yeah. I mean, Anderson, I think what we listened to just a few moments ago from the president, it sounded an awful like an attack on American democracy. And President Trump fired the first shot in this attack on our democracy. And let me tell you, just based on what I've observed covering him over the last 5 years, what the president counts on often is that he can exhaust his adversaries. He can exhaust you to the point where you just give up, where you let him have his way. And what we're seeing take place in these counting centers and these various states that are still up for grabs is the tireless work of our fellow Americans, counting the ballots. they're not getting exhausted. They're probably exhausted, but they're not going to let that stop them from doing what they're doing. And so I would say, and this has been sort of my, guiding principle covering this president for the last 4 or 5 years, is that you just can't get so exhausted to the point that you give up. We can't stop fact checking him. We can't stop calling him out on the carpet. What we heard from the president just a short while ago, it sounded like somebody who is just a sore loser. He sees the writing on the wall, and the writing on the wall says he's a one-term president. And as Gloria was just saying, he doesn't want to be one of the suckers and the losers. He wants to be a winner. And for the president, winning is everything. But at this point, the math isn't there. As a Trump advisor told me earlier today, the math isn't there. We need an act of God to change the course of this race. It's not happening. And so, my sense of it is at this point is that, yes, the president and his team, they're going to try to lock things up. They're going to try to lock up the gears of this democracy in court, but they're fighting a losing battle when you have the president saying, stop the counting in places like Philadelphia and Detroit and keep the counting going in Arizona. As somebody who's been involved in a court case with the president, that is the kind of legal argument that is just not going to cut the mustard. And my guess is that we're going to see more frustrated, sore loser-like pronouncements, declarations from the president over the coming days. But he's not in control of this. The voters are in control of this. Our fellow Americans are in control of this. The people who count the ballots and election authorities across the country who are in control of this, not the president. The Constitution guides us through this process. Established election law in this country guides us through this process. Ballots will be counted. Ballots will be certified. Election results will be certified. And the president, he can try to stay in the White House come January 20th, and Joe Biden could be sworn in over at the Four Seasons in Georgetown and be president down there. The president thinks he has won the game, but at this point, he is as much a witness to all of this as we are. He's as much a bystander to all of this as we are. We have to count the ballots, guys.
Yeah, this is a country of laws, and though the president has said he is a law and order president, we will see about that. There are laws. This will go to courts. Evidence has to be produced, as Rick Santorum said. If there is evidence, judges will decide on that. Much of what the president said tonight there is not real evidence, and if he has real evidence for it, that will be presented in court. The American people can see that. Caitlin Collins standing by as well. Caitlin?
Well, Anderson, I think not only were the president's comments undermining democracy, he also just seemed to express a complete misunderstanding of how elections work, and particularly this election and how people have been saying for the last 6 months they expected Tuesday to go and the days that followed. And we've seen it play out exactly as people predicted. But the president seemed genuinely surprised that he was leading in some states on Tuesday, and he is now trailing in those states as millions more votes have been counted, particularly from Democrats, given that the president encouraged his own supporters not to vote by mail for 6 months. When you wage a campaign against mail-in voting for the better part of the year before the election, your voters are not going to vote by mail, and then you are going to get your votes on election day and not in the days that follow. But he seemed genuinely surprised that he was leading by a substantial margin in places like Pennsylvania and like Georgia, and now those margins have been narrowed significantly as we have seen more Democratic votes come in and be counted and be perfectly legal. He also doesn't seem to know who is counting the votes, because he said in Georgia the process is being run by Democrats. It's a Republican Secretary of State in Georgia. I think the only thing the president said that was true there is that there is going to be litigation in the next several days. That is something we are certainly expecting from the Trump campaign. But he also made clear, Anderson, he is not planning on conceding this, even as we are seeing what's happening in Georgia and Pennsylvania, still waiting to find out what's going to happen in Arizona. And I just want to note, the Vice President, Mike Pence, has also been silent over the last 48 hours. He was not there with the president. It was just the press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany. But he just tweeted that he stands with the president and he agrees that all legal votes should be counted. Anderson, that is not what the president said, not even by a long shot, as he just came out to that briefing room.
Caitlin Collins, appreciate it. We are getting new numbers in from Georgia and Pennsylvania, where the president's lead is almost gone. We'll go to both battleground states as the votes continue to be counted.